Alrighty. If you got your Bibles, go ahead and open up to Revelation chapter 6. Revelation chapter 6, and I'll meet you all there in just a second. But I feel like I need to kind of set the scene a little bit for what we are about to study, because as the name of the book implies, it is a revelation, meaning it's a gradual, continual, rolling revelation. And so the book starts with John turning and seeing the Lamb and the description of the Lamb, and then Jesus Christ wants to address 7 churches, 7 literal churches that are in 7 literal towns, and so he makes that address first before the actual revelation begins. And so in chapter 4, and in fact you can look over there in chapter 4 in verse 1, it says, "After these things I looked and behold a door standing open in heaven." And so John turns and he sees a glimpse into heaven. And then he begins to describe what he sees in heaven. And what he's doing is he is literally describing the throne room of God. And he sees, and he looks and he sees, and first thing he sees is God sitting on the throne. And then he sees the 24 elders around the throne, more than likely representing the redeemed of the Old Covenant and the New Covenant, 12 and 12. Okay? And then he sees the 4 living creatures, meaning the cherubim and the Holy Spirit and Jesus Christ in the amongst of the 4 living creatures in the middle of the throne. And then in chapter 5, after he describes heaven and what heaven looks like and the myriads of angels worshiping God, in chapter 5 it pivots a little bit and he says, he takes his attention back to God on the throne, and he looks, and in God's right hand is a book with 7 seals on it. And remember, we talked about the seal, and when a king would write a letter to somebody, he'd put wax on the envelope with a piece of paper, sealed over, folded over. He'd put wax on it and take his signet ring and press that down into the wax. And then whoever had the authority to break that seal was the only one who was able to open the message that was given. Okay? Now, that book being sealed up with 7 seals means that it was perfectly and completely sealed up. And then John realizes that there's no one in heaven that is fit to open the book. It says that he began to weep greatly. And again, put yourself in his shoes. He literally just saw heaven. He's probably a little emotional. Then also that speaks of the seriousness and the importance of the book. But then one of the elders turns to him and says, "Stop weeping, quit crying. Behold, the lion from the tribe of, or the lamb from the, the lion from the tribe of Judah has overcome." And so John thinks he's going to turn and see a lion. He turns and he sees a lamb standing as if slain. And then the lamb was able to come up and take the book out of the right hand of God. And then as soon as the lamb, Jesus Christ, takes the book, all of heaven just erupts into this worship service. And that's what we saw there at the end of chapter 5. And you can look there, beginning in verse 9, all the way down to the end of the chapter, a worship service breaking out in heaven. Now, chapter 6 is simply a continuation of that vision. Because John got to see heaven. Well, then he saw the book in the right hand of God. Well, then Jesus goes up and takes the book. Well, now, beginning in chapter 6, Jesus is going to be taking that book or that scroll and one by one start breaking the seals and opening it up. And so right here in chapter 6, with the first 4 seals that are broken, we see 4 different images with the first 4 seals. Let's just get right into it, okay? Let's read beginning in verse 1 and down to verse 8. Read verses 1 through 8. Let me see, who can I pick on? Pharaoh Whitley. You're the man. Will you read chapter 6, verses 1 through 8 for me, please, sir?
Then I saw when the Lamb broke one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures saying with a voice of thunder, "Come." I looked, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. When he broke the 2nd seal, I heard the 2nd living creature come, and another, a red horse, went out. and to him who sat on it, it was granted to take peace from earth, and that men would slay one another, and a great sword was given to him. When he broke the third seal, I heard the third living creature saying, "Come." I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on him had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard something like a voice in the center of the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not damage the oil and the wine." The fourth seal. When the Lamb broke the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come." I looked, and behold, an ashen horse, and he who sat on it was named Death, and Hades, and was fallen with him. Authority was given him over the fourth of the earth to kill with the sword, with the famine, and with pestilence, and by the wild beasts of the earth.
All right. In verse 8, does anybody have anything else other than ashen horse?
Pale.
Do what?
Pale.
Pale horse. Anything else other than pale? Ashen or pale. Okay, we'll get to more of that in a little bit. Okay, before we keep going, these are the first 4 seals. Yes, ma'am. What you got?
Sickly pale.
Sickly pale? Okay. We'll get to more of that here in just a little bit. Take that, file that away in the back of your mind. We'll get to that more here in just a second. All right. So with each seal, Jesus would break a seal, and John would get a new vision. And so with the first seal, he sees a white horse and a voice coming out, one of the 4 living creatures. And again, I'm going to pop quiz for everybody that was here last week. Who are the 4 living creatures? Do what?
The cherubim.
The cherubim. And who are the cherubim? What are the cherubim?
Angels.
Angel. It's a rank of an angel. That's exactly right. And so anytime, remember, file that away in your mind, because you're going to see a reference to the 4 living creatures multiple times throughout the book of Revelation. And for those that weren't here for the past couple of days, John, when he looked into heaven, he saw 4 living creatures, and he describes them. One had the face of a lion, the other had the face of a man, the other had the face of a calf, and the other had the face of an eagle. Well, he was quoting from Ezekiel. Exact same thing in Ezekiel. And Ezekiel identifies them as cherubim. So John was simply saying, when he looked into heaven, he saw the cherubim, the rank of an angel. Okay? Now, with each seal that's broken, one of the cherubim steps up to John and says, "Come and see. Come take a look." And with each one, we see a different horse. And again, anybody ever heard of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse?
Yep.
That's where this comes from. By the way, a completely unbiblical designation of these 4 horses. Because the apocalypse is designated as the end of the world, right? And this is not that. So I'll show you more of that in a little bit. Let's just go through this one seal at a time, okay? So let's look at the first seal that's broken. And the first seal that we see there in verses 1 and 2 is a white horse. A white horse. Notice what it says there in verse 2. It says that the man had a bow, like a bow and arrow bow, okay? A crown was given to him, and it said that the man went out conquering. By the way, the Greek word for crown in verse 2 literally means a crown of victory, okay? So he's given a crown of victory, went out conquering, and notice that the significance of white represents victory elsewhere in the book of Revelation. Revelation 3:5, "He who overcomes will thus be clothed in white garments." And so white is used as purity or victory throughout the book of Revelation. More than likely, that's what it represents here. Okay, first seal broken. First thing he sees is a white horse, man sitting on a horse with a weapon of war. A bow. Crown of victory, the victory in war. And it says that the man actually went out conquering, and white representing victory, so therefore, the white horse represents military conquest. Okay? That's the white horse. One horse down. Number 2. Yes, ma'am.
I have a notation in mind as the first seal being the false Christ. And the second one is war.
I don't know where the false Christ would be coming from.
I don't know. It's just a notation I have in the Bible. It's like the title.
Yeah.
It says the book opened
In
the
fact,
first
I think
seal, false Christ.
in fact, I think that's. I'll show you how that's probably incorrect here in just a little bit.
Ooh, I don't know. It's an nasty.
Yeah. So that's the white horse. Now, seal number 2, Jesus would break the second seal, and vision number 2 that he gets is that of a red horse. We'll go back to verse 3 and 4, and let's describe this one. It says that it was granted to him to take peace from the earth, that men would slay one another, and a great sword was given to him. By the way, in the Greek language, there's in your Greek New Testament, there's two different types of swords that are usually used in your Greek New Testament. One of them was usually like a small dagger of some kind. The other one would have been a long sword that had been used in battle. This one is the second of those two. So if we're talking about a sword used in battle, same Greek word in Matthew 10:34, Jesus said, I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. That's the Greek word for sword used here, okay? The idea of red, and again, this is where we just kind of have to speculate, because we can't say for sure that white represents victory. We don't know that. Red, first thing that comes to my mind is blood. More than likely blood, especially when you look here, it says that granted to take peace. Well, the first one had a bow. Well, this one's got a sword. And it said that men would slay one another. What that more than likely represents is war, but probably maybe even like civil war. Because if the first one represented military conquest, he had a bow in his hand. He went out to actually conquer. And this one referenced men slaying one another. Well, probably more than likely represents civil war. Okay? All right. 2 horses down. 2 more to go. Jesus takes the scroll and he breaks the 3rd seal. And notice what comes out. It says a black horse in verses 5 and 6. Notice what it says there. It says there that the man had a pair of scales. Well, you go down to the grocery store down here at Lowe's, and you want to buy a box of grapes, do you have to weigh anything out? Or is it already pre-packaged and pre-weighed and pre-labeled for you to just grab? It's ready to go for you, right? Well, you wanted to go down to the marketplace in 1st century and buy something, guess what they would do? They would weigh it out. And so here's this man on a black horse having a pair of scales. Notice the reason why. By the way, this was used as symbolism to show the measuring of food and specifically the scarcity of it. Because it says there, in the verse, it says, a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a denarius, 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, do not harm the oil and the wine. Think about that for just a second, okay? First of all, notice where the voice comes from. In the midst of the 4 living creatures. Get to more of that here in just a little bit. But it says there, a quart of wheat for a denarius. What is a denarius?
A day's labor.
A day's labor. Okay? So you get a quart of wheat for a day's labor, 3 quarts of barley for a day's labor. What does that symbolize?
Symbolizes a lot of money for a little bit.
A lot of money for a little bit. Yeah, you work all day for a loaf of bread.
Kind of like what we got today.
Do what?
Kind of like what we got today.
That's right. Inflation sure is taking a toll. Yes. But that's what it symbolizes. Hard work, just so a man can pay for his food for the day. And then the idea of not harming the oil and the wine, this is what scholars believe. I don't know that it holds any weight, but the fact that in times of trouble, luxuries are in abundance, but nobody wants them because people are literally starving to death. And so the oil and wine are in abundance, but what people need is bread and things to survive on. So therefore, the black horse represents famine. Okay? All right, scroll number 4, horse number 4, living creature number 4. There in verse 8, it says, and this is why I asked the question, my version of the text says pale horse. And so it says there that upon breaking the 4th seal, it's a pale horse that is seen. Pale is the Greek word chloros, where we get the English word chlorophyll from, which is like a greenish, yellowish, pale color. Kind of symbolizing something that's sickly looking, okay?
Cute green.
Do what?
Cute green.
That's right. I had gallbladder issues, and my wife told me that I actually turned green, so riddle me that. It says the man sitting on the horse was named Death, okay? So we get the name of the guy that's sitting on this horse. His name was Death. It doesn't tell us anything that he's carrying. The other 3 horses said that they were carrying something. First guy had a bow, weapon of war. Second guy had a sword, weapon of war. Third guy had a scales, showing famine. Fourth guy here, his name is Death, and Hades follows with him. Okay?
Now, this is where I wasn't reading this and I was thinking, okay, now, this point in time, Hades, hell, is the unseen place, right?
Hades, yes, not hell,
Yeah.
but Hades.
Hades
Yeah.
is the unseen place, right?
Yes.
Where paradise is on one side, hell is on the other.
Yes.
Right? So now Hades is following, coming with it.
Yes. And so what is that? What does that symbolize? It symbolizes that souls are being picked up, and I mean it's literally death. Is what it is. The idea of death and Hades following with him. Well, that's still to this day. When people die and pass away, your soul goes to Hades, and so there's nothing really special or deep or different about this. Okay. But it symbolizes that there's going to be a lot of it, okay? Whereas today, and I don't know if anybody passed away in San Sabbath today or not. I don't know. But if they did, they experienced death and Hades, just like anybody else that dies. But the idea of this is the fourth scroll that's open, and the man sitting on a horse, and his name is actually Death, and Hades is following with him, kind of gives this picture of just like sweeping death across the countryside, doesn't it? And again, Hades, J.R. pointed this out, but the Greek word for Hades literally means place of the unseen. It's not hell, okay? Don't let those be mistaken in your mind or confused in your mind. The Greek word for hell is Gehenna. It speaks of a place of deep, dark torment. Hades just means place of the unseen. Well, do we see souls? Somebody passes away in the hospital. Do we see the soul going up out of them? Of course not. And if somebody's soul goes to paradise, do we see that? Or if it goes to torment, do we see that? Of course not. But someday there's going to be a judgment day where we're going to go to our ultimate destination, heaven and hell. And so the souls are being collected in Hades right now. Now, I don't want to turn this lesson for the rest of the lesson into a lesson on Hades. We're getting into some really deep stuff there. So, gonna have to take my word for it. Go home and study it yourselves. There's a difference between heaven and hell, paradise and torment. Okay? Paradise and torment are in the Hadean realm. Okay? Now, by the way, the book of Revelation on Judgment Day says God throws Hades into the pit of fire because it's no longer needed, because souls are now in heaven and hell. Anyway, I'm getting too far deep into it. Either way, this writer, with his name being Death and Hades following after him, represents death in the afterlife. And again, with him being on a horse, kind of gives this picture of like sweeping death across the countryside. Okay? All right. There's the four horsemen. That's the four horsemen. When you hear somebody referring to the four horsemen of the apocalypse, that's what they're talking about. The white horse, the red horse, the black horse, and the pale horse. All right, so let's sum up just a little bit before we continue, okay? The white horse is the equivalent of military conquest. It represents military conquest. The red horse represents civil war. The black horse represents famine. And the pale horse, or the ashen horse, or the greenish-yellow colored horse, represents death and the afterlife. Okay? Now, here is where things get deep. Zechariah chapter 6, verses 1 and 3. Now remember I told y'all that if there's something in the book of Revelation that is not directly quoted from somewhere else, we simply just cannot say this equals that. Okay? I'll give you an example for those that weren't here in the past couple of weeks. Revelation chapter 4. John looks, and around the throne is a rainbow. And the 24 elders standing in the midst of the rainbow. Okay? He doesn't quote that from anywhere else in the Bible. We can kind of speculate as to what it means, but you cannot say this 100% means that, because he didn't quote it from anywhere else. Okay? This, he does. All right, one more time. Get those colors in your mind, okay? White, red, black, and pale. Zechariah 6, 1 and 3. Now I lifted up my eyes again and looked, and behold, 4 chariots and were coming forth from between mountains, and the mountains were bronze mountains. With the first chariot were red horses, with the second chariot black horses, the third chariot white horses, and the fourth chariot strong dappled horses, or like a pale speckled color, or an ashen horse. Do you see it? That's what he's quoting from. By the way, in Zechariah chapter 6, verses 1 and 3, Zechariah is describing the destruction and the justice of God towards Babylon. Okay? That's what he's describing. So Zechariah gets this image from God, an image, and God tells him what the image is. God tells him, this is my judgment, this is my justice. And then John quotes it. What do you think John's trying to point towards? Judgment, justice, wrath of God. Okay? Now, when you consider what is said about the four different horses, okay? I want you to notice this, okay? And this is why I strongly believe the white horse does not represent a false Christ. Because look, it says a crown was given to him. The red horse, it was granted to the one. Also, there was given to him. The black horse references a voice in the midst of the four living creatures. And then the pale horse, power was given to them. What does that tell you about these horses? Are they operating on their own authority?
No.
Okay? They're operating on someone else's authority. And it seems to me like the authority that they're operating on was this voice in the midst of the four living creatures. All right. Go back to verse 4 or chapter 4. Oh wait, sorry. Chapter 5 and verse 6. Actually, go ahead and read verse 5. Let me see, who can I pick on? JR, are you there?
Yeah.
Read verse 5 and 6.
Oh. But one of the elders said to me, do not weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has prevailed to open the scroll and to loose its 7 seals. And I looked, and behold, in the midst of the throne and of the 4 living creatures, in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb as though it had been slain.
All right. Who is standing in the midst of the 4 living creatures?
Jesus.
Jesus Christ. In this vision that John received of the 4 horsemen who clearly represent devastation of some kind, destruction of some kind, okay? We can talk and argue about what white, red, black, and pale represent, but you cannot doubt that they represent destruction of some kind. Who does it seem like they were receiving their authority from?
Jesus.
Jesus, the voice from the midst of the 4 living creatures. Okay? Now, you take that and you also compare it with what it describes and what we know about Jesus. Well, they were granted authority. Well, who is the ruler of all authority in heaven but Jesus Christ? Revelation 1:5. From Jesus Christ, the faithful witness, the firstborn of the dead, the ruler of the kings, the King of kings. Also, when we consider that Jesus has the keys to death and Hades. Well, who was on the last horse? What was his name? Death. And what followed with him? Hades. Well, who has the keys of death and Hades? Revelation 1:17 and 18. The firstborn, the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end, has the keys of the death and of Hades. Well, who is that? Jesus Christ. And then also, you consider that he was the one in the midst of the 4 living creatures, Revelation 5 and verse 6, as we read. What it appears like to me is that these 4 living creatures, whatever they represent, they definitely represent destruction of some kind, receive their authority from Jesus Christ to go out and inflict devastation of some kind on somebody. Okay? Now, you can also cross-reference that. Go, if you're in Revelation chapter 6, everybody skim down to verse 16. And I'll throw it up on the screen for you. Revelation 6 and verse 16. JR, read that verse for me.
Revelation 6. Let me find it here. and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb.
From the wrath of who?
The Lamb.
And who's the Lamb?
Jesus.
Jesus Christ. That's at the end of the chapter, describing the wrath and destruction that was to come. And whose wrath and destruction is it?
Jesus.
Jesus' wrath and destruction. All right, let that sink in for just a little bit. Who in here has seen the religious world take and depict Jesus as just your best friend who's never going to hurt you?
Everybody.
Is that not the saddest thing in the world? And by the way, yes, he loves you. He cares for you deeply. He doesn't want you to be lost. But I heard a country song one time that said, I'd like to have a beer with Jesus. And that's not the Jesus I see. Whose wrath and indignation is falling upon people who don't obey him. Now, we kind of established that, okay? So seals 1, 2, 3, and 4 are 4 horses, 4 riders that represent great destruction through war, civil war, and famine, okay? Now, the question is, why? Why would Jesus inflict wrath upon somebody?
Well, I kind of would look like maybe, okay, my dad sent me down here to go through all this misery to save you guys, and y'all just pooped in my face, man.
Sure, absolutely. That's a huge part of it. Is Jesus is righteously indignant towards people who disobey him. However, we actually have an answer to exactly, specifically who this prophecy is towards and against. And it is in seal number 5. So, now Jesus goes, we go back to the scroll. Jesus has broken 4 seals. Oh, by the way, if you look there in verse 8, it says, I feel like I need to touch on this just a little bit. Verse 8, it says, authority was given to them, meaning all 4 of them. Well, again, who was that authority given by? It was given by Jesus Christ. Was given to them, all 4 horsemen, over 1/4 of the earth. Okay? If destruction is coming on the 1/4 of the earth, is that the destruction of the whole world?
No.
I mean, it's just a part of it, right? To kill with a sword, famine, pestilence, wild beasts on the earth. All right. Seal number 5 tells us why, all right? So let's look at verses 9 through 11 now. Casey Hibbler, will you read Revelation chapter 6, verses 9 through 11, please, for me, sir. The 5th seal.
When he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? Then a white robe was given to each of them, and it was said to them that they should rest a little while longer, until both the number of their fellow servants and their brethren, who would be killed as they were, was completed.
Okay. Thank you, sir, very much. So, it says there, right as he opens the seal, it says, John sees under the altar those who had been slain. Okay? Notice that it says those who had been slain and not simply those who died. Because we know at this point there are several who have died in Christ, probably very peacefully in their sleep, maybe even perhaps, right? Or by disease of some kind. But people who were Christians that weren't necessarily murdered or slain, okay? John looks under the altar and sees people that were slain, that were killed, murdered. It says because of the word of God and because of the testimony which they had maintained. Well, who is that?
The martyrs.
Christian martyrs. That's exactly right. All right, so by the way, lock this away in the back of your mind. I told you, anytime that you hear 4 living creatures, lock that away in your mind, because you'll see it throughout Revelation, 4 living creatures, cherubim, okay? You're also going to see a reference to souls under the altar, or just the altar in general of God, okay? And just remember, lock this away, that the souls that are under the altar is a specific reference to martyred Christians, okay? And by the way, at the time of this writing, Stephen had been martyred. James had been martyred. Antipas in Revelation 2:13. We don't know much about him, but we know he was martyred. And historical writings tell us that both Paul and Peter had been killed by the time that John wrote the book of Revelation, as well as many other apostles at this point. Okay? So he says, he turns and looks and sees under the altar those who had been slain. And it says that there that they're crying out. Look what it says there. They cry out with a loud voice. Salvation I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong chapter. It says they cry out saying, how long, O Lord, holy and true, wilt thou refrain from judging and avenging our blood on those who dwell on the earth? And so they're crying out, how long? They're watching other Christians be slain and murdered, and they're crying out to God, how long, God, are you going to let this go on? Let me remind you that Jesus Christ said that martyrs will be avenged in their time, in God's time. Look, 18:7 and 8. Now will not God bring about justice for his elect who cry to him day and night? And will he delay long over them? I tell you that he will bring about justice for them quickly. You may want to underline verse 10 and reference Luke 18:7 and 8. It'd be a great verse to cross-reference right there. It says there in verse 11 that there was given to them white robes. Those white robes were to comfort them because they were robes of victory. Revelation 7:14, these are the ones who come out of the great tribulation. They've washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. And so they were comforted with white robes. So, when Jesus opened the fifth seal, he turns and he looks and he doesn't see another horse. He doesn't see any more destruction. He sees killed Christians, martyred Christians. Alright, so doesn't that explain the reason for the four horses?
No.
If the four horses represent destruction, why is the destruction coming? Martyred Christians. Okay? So, seals number 1, 2, 3, 4 represent destruction. Seal number 5 tells us the reason why the Lamb is bringing destruction is for the martyred Christians. Well, seal number 6 tells us who is to face that destruction. It tells us specifically, okay? So, let's get into it. Revelation chapter 6, verses 12 through 17 there. Charles Key, will you read that when you get there, please, sir? The wind take your pages.
When he opened the sixth seal, I looked, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth. The full moon became like blood. And the stars of the sky fell to the earth as the fig tree sheds its winter fruit was taken by a gale. The sky vanished like a scroll that has been rolled up, and every mountain and island were removed from its place. And the kings of the earth, and the great ones, and the generals, and the rich, and the powerful, and everyone, slave and free, hid themselves in the cave and among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne, from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of the wrath is come, who can stand?
All right. By the way, I love in verse 17, the great day of their wrath. You may want to underline that and write out a reference to the Trinity. Because it's speaking of the Lamb as well as God the Father and God the Spirit. Now, notice here, when the sixth seal is broken by Jesus Christ, it describes this great cosmic event, basically, okay? It tells us that there was this great earthquake, and the sun becomes black, and the moon becomes like blood. Stars fall to the earth, and the sky receded as a scroll, as if when rolled up, and every mountain and island moved out of its place, okay? So, again, just to kind of wrap up a little bit, first four scrolls are four horses that represent destruction of some kind. Seal number 5, he breaks it, turns and looks. There's the martyred Christians under the altar of God. Well, then seal number 6 is broken, and John turns and looks, and he sees this just great event take place. An earthquake, and the sun being black, and the moon becoming like blood, stars falling from the earth, and the sky literally being rolled up as a scroll, and every mountain and island moving out of its place. And again, if you're going to know the book of Revelation, You better know your Old Testament because there's over 340 references to the Old Testament in the book of Revelation. And here we have another one. John is quoting loosely from a couple of different passages. Isaiah 13, 9 through 19, and Isaiah 34, 1 through 10. And in both of them, he is describing destruction that takes place. He describes a great earthquake, or every mountain and island moved out of its place. Isaiah 13, 13, therefore I'll make the heavens tremble, and the earth shall be shaken from its place. The sun becoming black. Isaiah 13, 10, the sun will be dark when it rises. Also the stars would fall from heaven. Isaiah 34 and verse 4. All the host of heaven will wear away. Notice also that it says, as a leaf withers from the vine. As a leaf withers from the vine, or as one withers from the fig tree. Go back to Revelation 6 and look there in verse 13. Revelation 6:13. It says, the stars of the sky fell to the earth as a fig tree cast its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind. There we kind of have somewhat of the same imagery of the stars falling there. The sky receding as a scroll. Isaiah 34 verse 4. The sky will be rolled up like a scroll. Do you know who Isaiah is giving this prophecy of? Isaiah 13:1. The oracle concerning Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amos saw. Now, in the book of Revelation, and I don't have time to get into it, you're just going to have to take my word for it, Babylon is a direct representation of Rome. And we'll get into that more, and it's going to be a few weeks because Revelation chapter 14 is where we finally identified Babylon. And when we get there, you will see, I will show you that Babylon equals Rome in the way that the great beast is described. We'll get there, okay? Just bear with me. You're just going to have to take my word for now. In the book of Revelation, Babylon equals Rome, okay? Well, in this oracle that Isaiah was given, God was showing Isaiah what it was going to look like when Babylon would fall. John quotes Isaiah when Babylon was going to fall to speak of none other than the fall of Rome. Well, go back to the horses. Military conquest. Lots of Rome would be conquered, especially the outer districts of Rome would be conquered. One little kingdom would fall right after another. The red horse, more than likely representing civil war. Rome fell from within. Famine, pestilence, the black horse, Rome experienced a lot of that. As Rome would begin to fall and the nation would begin to crumble, food became extremely scarce. And guess what was in abundance? Oil and wine by the pallet. Because Rome had just gotten so indulged in sin and immorality that wine was everywhere, but food wasn't. And death and Hades followed with it. And so, again, chapter 6, you can sum it up like this. I'll give you a breakdown right now. It's super simple, right? First 4 seals. Jesus is showing what the destruction would look like. Seal number 5. He's showing you why there's coming destruction because of martyred Christians. Seal number 6, he tells you exactly who it's coming to. It's coming towards Rome. So, Revelation chapter 6 opens and closes like this. Rome was slaughtering Christians wholesale. The wrath of the Lamb was going to come because of it. And that's it. Yes, sir?
It kind of makes sense if you were writing a letter and sending it through Rome to someone in Rome. You probably wouldn't want to say, hey, this is how this country is going to fall.
Yes, exactly. Well, and again, put yourself in the shoes of a faithful Jew, okay? You're a faithful Jew in 1st century. Do you have the New Testament yet?
No.
Mass copy? No, you don't. All right. So most of them did have a version of the Hebrew Bible. All right. When Christ came and lived and died and ascended into heaven, guess what those Jews went and did night and day? They went and studied their Old Testament looking for Jesus in it. That's what they did. Not only that, the ones who grew up as faithful Jews, they knew their Bible. If I were to say to you something like, pride comes before the... All right? Y'all know your New Testament pretty well, don't you? All right, so John says there's a pale horse, a black horse, a red horse, and a white horse. As a faithful Jew, you're going to go, it's Zechariah. That's what he was doing. He was giving a coded message to show what was going to take place. And again, the message is very simple. Rome was killing Christians. The wrath of the Lamb is going to come upon Rome. And that's it. It's as simple as that. And we can go into we can go in deeper and start looking at, well, the color of this horse and the color of that horse. But again, you're trying to read into something that we just simply don't have the answer for. And so in the book of Revelation, we stick with the things that we know for sure. And anytime John especially quotes from the Old Testament, we can know exactly what that's going to mean. All right. That concludes the lesson tonight. Question?